It was the 1970s, the last summer in my hometown, before heading off to university. The dog days of August had a bittersweet, elegiac quality. We wanted to leave home so bad we could taste it, but we also realized we would be leaving most of our friendships behind, some for good. The weather was beautiful, which somehow added to the sadness. We were sitting in lawn chairs behind my buddy's house, sucking on stubbies. My bud had a guest, a guy from out west, who brought with him a bottle of ouzo, or, as he liked to call it, Greek vodka. We were shooting the shit about the paranormal, and women, music, and women, movies, and women, and I think we also talked a bit about women. But mainly we talked about UFOs. Eric von Daniken was extremely popular at the time, and we were talking about the whole ancient astronaut concept when Danny, the guy from out west, said, "What the hell is that?" A whitish, faintly luminous cloud had appeared overhead and just seemed to hang there in the night sky. "What is that? Smoke?" Buddy said. "Is there a fire somewhere?" "It's just kind of hanging there," I said, "like it was stationary or something." "Maybe it's a UFO," Danny barked, and we all laughed. It was well after midnight when I left to make the long walk back to the apartment building, but I didn't mind. I was in a good mood, smoking cigarettes, listening to rock songs in my head, and thinking about the night's conversation. In other words, I was thinking about nothing really, not even about women. I wore my hair long in those days, and yeah, I had hair, and I wore it right down to my shoulders, and as I walked along, I began to feel a strange, prickly sensation, as if my hair was starting to rise. And it was. I instinctively put my hands up to push it back down, and as I did, I looked up and was surprised to see a brightness overhead, a brightness which emanated from a whitish, faintly luminous cloud, which looked very similar to the one we had observed from my friend's backyard. As I gazed up at the strange cloud, the prickly sensation increased, and I was swept with an intense sense of longing, a longing which seemed to encapsulate all the bittersweet sadness and anticipation of that last summer of childhood. I wanted to go to the cloud, to be with it, to rise up in the air, rise. And then, suddenly, I was frightened, very frightened. This wasn't a normal cloud. What kind of cloud glowed like that? Like it was phosphorescent or radioactive or something. What kind of cloud followed people around? Clouds can't follow you around, right? Right? I turned down a side street and began walking rapidly, trying to get away from the prickly sensation and from the cloud, which continued to hang overhead, above me, as if it was keeping pace with my movements, as if it was stalking me. I tried to walk faster and refused to look upwards, even as the crawling of my scalp became more and more distracting. I also resisted the urge to break into a run, until I felt the invisible hands touch my elbows. I panicked and actually ran out onto the nearby road without looking. There was a flash of blinding light, the blaring of a loud horn, followed by an angry voice. "What the hell you doing, man?" I recognized the voice as belonging to a guy from school. I hurried over to his 66 Fairlane and yelped, "Can you give me a ride?" "Somebody after you?" the guy asked, and when I nodded, he said, "Get in." I can't remember the story I made up for the Fairlane dude, but whatever it was, he bought it. When he dropped me off, I quickly ducked inside the building and hid in the apartment with all the lights out. But the whole time, as I stood in darkness, I could see through the windows the strange, luminous cloud moving back and forth across the night sky, back and forth, as if it was searching for something. Or someone. Searching for me? No way was that a normal cloud. For the next few weeks, I was apprehensive every time I left the apartment and tried never to be alone when I did. But in less than a month, I left town, and with first-year university to worry about, I began to forget, and eventually forgot, the entire episode. And it would have stayed forgotten, but for Ian's suicide attempt. I heard about it when I was home for the Christmas break, but I didn't have an opportunity to talk to Ian until the next summer. I'd come back to town to spend the summer working my old job as a hospital porter. Ian was an outpatient. He seemed the same laid-back, soft-spoken dude he'd always been. In other words, he seemed totally sane. We agreed to meet up for beers, and he told me the following. "You heard about what happened?" "I heard something. I didn't try to kill myself." I made some kind of non-committal response, which appeared to irritate him. "I always thought of you as a guy who could think for himself. So do you want to hear what really happened?" I did. On the night in question, Ian had had a major row with his parents and had stormed out of the house. Ian's old people wanted him to become an accountant, but he wanted to go to art school instead. He had walked down to the lake and walked out to the end of the pier, a haven for upset youth throughout my upset youth. Ian sat at the base of the lighthouse at the end of the pier and contemplated his situation and his prospects. In the end, he decided he would leave home, work at a factory job for a year or two, and put himself through art school. Nothing was going to interfere with my dream of becoming an artist, he told me. I was going to make it, and I knew I was going to make it. Directly above me, the clouds seemed to glow with an exquisite and ethereal light which radiated joy. I experienced such a feeling of relief at having finally come to a decision. It felt akin to ecstasy. My spirit seemed to be rising out of my body, like I was rising into the air. And then, suddenly, I was rising into the air. What felt like hands had taken me by the elbows and had pulled me up off the ground. My scalp was tingling and my joy had turned to horror. I cried out and tried to fight the invisible hands, but the harder I fought, the stronger their grip. I kept yelling, "No, no, no!" And after they had lifted me about 20 feet off the ground, they let go. Fortunately, I was over the lake and landed in the water, and was quickly fished out by the people who came running when they heard my screams. I tried to explain what happened, but I was in shock and pretty incoherent, and wound up in the psych ward. As soon as they found out about my fight with the old people, they accused me of committing suicide. And what could I say? I tried to tell the doctors what had happened, which really did make me sound crazy. No one saw me up in the air, so they just thought I'd thrown myself into the lake. Eventually, I just went along with them. It was easier that way. Ian said his parents no longer opposed him going to art school, but he'd kind of lost interest and didn't figure it was worth having spent time in the psych ward. I never saw Ian again, and later that summer, he disappeared. For good. Vanished. I don't think Ian thought I believed him, but I did. The prickly sensation on the scalp, the invisible hands, the luminous cloud. Could the same thing have happened to me if I hadn't escaped by car? Would I have disappeared? For good? Vanished? Like poor Ian? If so, who or what is responsible? And what have they done to poor Ian? Yes, what have they done to poor Ian? Share your opinions below, and stay safe. Stay subscribed. Ring the bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and feel free to share this opus with anyone you please. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring cryptids such as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the black-eyed children. Please help me to reach my target of 2,021 subs in 2021. So, what happened to me and to Ian? Speculate away, but do try to keep both feet on the ground. Till midnight. Cheers.